It was 8 years ago that I landed in this world. In college, I fell for Samantha Hayes, the kind of first love you feel in your bones, the kind that spans 2 lifetimes. Our romance was like something out of a movie, 2.5 years of holding hands through autumns and springs. But a sudden car crash ripped it all apart. It killed both of Samantha's parents and landed her in the ICU. While I was at the hospital, watching over her, the doctor told me both her kidneys had suffered catastrophic damage. She needed a transplant to live. As it happened, I was a match. After wrestling with the decision, I prepaid a hefty sum for her medical expenses, enough to cover a transplant if a donor kidney became available. Then I hired a private nurse to look after her and left the country to continue my studies abroad. For years, stepping back on a familiar soil after 4 years felt surreal. I was dragging my suitcase through the airport arrivals terminal, head down, trying to get an Uber on my phone, when a clear, familiar voice cut through the noise behind me. Cole! I turned around instinctively. Even after 4 years, even in a crowded airport, I recognized Samantha in an instant. She was standing not far away, framed in a halo of light. She was still slender, her features just as I remembered them. But there was a new fragility in her eyes, a kind of brokenness she never had before, like moonlight through a thin haze. It was impossible to look away. Samantha, I said, my voice barely a whisper, the end of her name trembling on my lips. I never regretted my decision to leave without a word. I love Samantha, but not enough to sacrifice myself to save her. My parents would never have agreed to it anyway. But seeing her now, alive and breathing in front of me, a tide of guilt washed over me. At least she was alive. At least she was okay. Long time no see. Samantha walked toward me, a bright smile on her face, seemingly oblivious to the storm inside me. The hem of her dress swayed with each step. Seeing me frozen in place, she spoke casually. My car's in the parking garage. I can give you a ride. I hesitated, my lips pressed together. But her hand was already on mine, her fingertips cool against my skin. In that instant, all the words I'd prepared caught in my throat. I just let her lead me away, as if in a trance. As we left the parking garage, my eyes caught the payment screen, $15. 00. A thought slammed into my brain. She wasn't just passing by. She had been here waiting for me. The car, a sleek black Bentley, pulled up in front of an elegant steakhouse. Samantha led me inside as if she owned the place. The food arrived quickly. She held her knife and fork, expertly slicing into a filet mignon as she spoke. So how have you been? All those years abroad? If it weren't for her bright eyes locked on mine, I would have thought it was just two old friends catching up. I took a sip of lemon water. Not bad. I answered, trying to sound casual. School went well. Life was stable. After that simple exchange, a heavy silence fell between us, broken only by the soft clink of silverware on porcelain. After a long moment, Samantha broke the stalemate. She put down her utensils, dabbed her lips with a napkin, and her smile was tinged with a hint of resignation. Aren't you going to ask how I've been? Oh, I've been mechanically sawing at my own steak. I snapped back to reality, my posture straightening in embarrassment. So how have you been? I'm okay, she said, her tone light, as if she were telling someone else's story. After my parents died, all my relatives, the old shareholders of the company, they were all circling, fighting over my inheritance. It got pretty ugly. Thankfully, Preston's family helped out. They got me through the worst of it. The company is completely under my control now. She said it so calmly, but I could imagine the living hell she must have gone through. Grieving the loss of her parents, her body still recovering from surgery, and having to face a pack of circling vultures, greedy relatives, and ruthless business rivals, all alone. The thought was staggering. I remembered how, when she was lying in that hospital bed, plenty of relatives came to visit, but not a single one offered to help with the bills. That alone said everything. And Preston. The name landed like a stone in my gut. Preston Vance, Samantha's childhood friend. His family was prominent, a perfect match for hers. He'd always been in love with her, but he was so damn awkward about it that I, the outsider, had swept in and won her over. I remembered him confronting me a few times when we were dating, telling me flat out that I wasn't right for Samantha. Looking back, he wasn't wrong. My family had a business, sure, a net worth of a few million that seemed like a fortune to most people. But compared to billionaire families like the Hayeses and the Van Cess, we were in different universes. I was just too young and arrogant to think about any of that back then. Earth to Colt. Samantha's fingers tapped lightly on the table, her voice edged with a playful reproach. What are you thinking about? You're a million miles away. Nothing, I said, quickly pulling myself back. I avoided her gaze and muttered, sorry. Later that night, Samantha drove back to her penthouse overlooking the lake. The apartment was pitch black. She hit a switch on the wall, and warm light flooded the space, revealing Preston Vance sitting silently on the sofa, a motionless silhouette. "Why are you sitting in the dark?" she asked casually, kicking off her heels. "You went to see Cole Ashton, didn't you?" Preston's voice came from the sofa, low and cold as ice. Samantha's movements paused for a second. Her tone didn't waver. "I ran into him at the airport. We had dinner." "Do you take me for an idiot, Samantha?" Preston shot up from the sofa. "That bastard left you to rot in the ICU. "It was me," he roared. "It was my kidney I gave you. And the second he's back in town, you go running to him? Is this how you repay me?" Samantha's face turned to stone. Her eyes, now glacial, fixed on him. "So what? Didn't I marry you, just like your parents wanted?" she said, taking slow, deliberate steps toward him, her voice dripping with suppressed contempt. "Didn't your parents start nagging for a baby? Haven't I been cooperating? And what about you?" She sneered. "Besides getting your spit all over my face every time, what else can you do?" "Samantha." Preston's face was crimson, his eyes shot with blood from the rage. But Samantha couldn't be bothered to look at him for another second. She grabbed her purse and walked straight toward the stairs, completely ignoring the medical report lying on the coffee table. Watching her disappear around the corner of the staircase, all of Preston's pent-up fury and humiliation finally erupted. He grabbed a glass from the coffee table and hurled it against the floor. It shattered, sending shards flying across the room. "God damn it!" A choked, guttural cry tore from his throat, echoing endlessly in the vast, empty living room. After leaving Samantha, I took the L train to Union Station, then caught a cab home from there. The moment I pushed open the front door, the familiar smell of home cooking hit me. My mom, wearing an apron, poked her head out of the kitchen, the smile lines around her eyes crinkling. "You're finally back. Go wash your hands. Your father went out to get you some of that barbecue you like." The dinner table was steaming with food. My mom kept piling things on my plate, chattering away. Even though my parents had visited me abroad for Christmas, we hadn't seen each other in over half a year. I missed them. I mumbled responses as I shoveled rice into my mouth, careful not to mention running into Samantha at the airport. I wasn't blind to the look in her eyes. I could see the embers of what we used to have still glowing, but I knew, deep down, we could never go back. I had never once considered rekindling things. Putting aside the fact that what happened back then was a chasm between us, I'd even had another relationship while I was abroad. But she was a wild one, a European girl who spent every other night at some club or rave. At my core, I'm a traditional guy. I just couldn't handle it. Not to mention her stamina was terrifying, 6 or 7 times a night, every night. After a few months, my body couldn't take it anymore. We parted on good terms. That little episode taught me that in a relationship, compatibility is more important than passion. And as for back then, I stayed by Samantha's hospital bed for a month. Her relatives would show up, check if she was dead yet, and leave. No one cared. I used my own savings and asked my parents for more to pay $50,000 for her medical bills. As far as I was concerned, I'd done more than enough. But none of that could erase the fact that, in the end, I left without a word. Even the Samantha of today, more beautiful than ever, the head of a massive corporation, radiating success, couldn't change that. I knew that if we tried to force it, that chasm between us would become a battleground. Every argument would lead back to the past, tearing old wounds open until we were both destroyed. The only possible outcome was mutual destruction. After a few days of catching up with my parents, I started working in my dad's company. These days, a degree from overseas isn't that special. Most are just rich kids getting a fancy line on their resume. It made more sense to take over the family business than to job hunt. I learned the ropes from my dad, try to grow what we had. Life fell into a steady, uneventful rhythm. I spent my days on the production floor, learning about quality control, meeting clients. I was constantly busy. The only snag was my mom, who was relentlessly trying to set me up on blind dates. I wasn't interested, so I dodged them whenever I could. I've been running on this hamster wheel for about a month. One evening, as I was walking out of the company building, a gleaming black Bentley slid to a smooth stop right in front of me, blocking my path. The window rolled down, revealing Samantha's exquisite profile. "Get in." Her voice was clipped, carrying an air of command that left no room for argument. "Is something wrong?" I asked, hesitating. I thought that after I didn't contact her, our last meeting would be the end of it. I never expected her to show up at my doorstep. Samantha took off her sunglasses, her bright eyes curving into crescent moons. "You wouldn't come to me, so I had to come to you." Before I could respond, she pushed her door open, walked around to the passenger side, got in, and tilted her chin at me. You used to say you wanted to drive a Bentley. See how it feels. Her words were like a key, unlocking a box of memories I'd long since shut. When I was a kid, my dad's business was just starting out, and we were solidly middle class. One time, I went with him to meet a client who drove a Bentley. When I heard the car cost over $500,000, my jaw dropped. All I could think was, how can a car be that expensive? Later, when Samantha and I were dating, she asked me what my dream car was. I mentioned the Bentley offhandedly. A few days later, she ran up to me, blushing, and pulled up her pant leg to show me her thigh. She'd stuck a temporary tattoo of the silver Bentley wings on her skin. She said her family didn't have one, and she couldn't buy one for me yet. So this was her way of making my dream come true for now. I took a deep breath, walked around to the driver's side, and got in. I had to admit, faced with this version of Samantha, I was softening. The girl I knew had been completely lovesick, her world revolving around me, giving me all her tenderness. I wasn't like that, but I wasn't made of stone either. Where to? I buckled my seatbelt, my voice softening unintentionally. If I couldn't avoid this, I might as well get it over with. Lay everything on the table, put an end to her hopes for good. It was better than dragging things out and making us both miserable. Let's go for a drive along the river. I didn't say another word. I started the car and merged smoothly into traffic. We ended up in a scenic parking spot overlooking the Chicago River. The evening breeze blew in off the water, carrying a damp chill. I reached into my pocket for a pack of cigarettes, my fingers just grazing the box before I remembered Samantha's health. I silently pushed it back in. I was a coward, I said after a few minutes of just feeling the breeze, not bothering to beat around the bush. I turned to look at her, my gaze direct and serious. I ran away when I should have stayed. I owe you an apology for that. Samantha's eyes flickered. She quickly looked away, out at the river, and forced a light-hearted laugh. It's fine. It was so long ago. I never held it against you. Besides, she continued, you stayed with me for so long, hired a nurse for me, paid for my medical bills. You already did more than enough. Samantha, I cut her off, my tone growing heavier. Stop coming to see me. We're not right for each other. The moment the words were out, her face fell. But just as quickly, she turned back to me, a smile blooming on her face again, though it didn't reach her eyes. You arrogant jerk. You don't think I'm still in love with you, do you? She bit her lower lip, as if steeling herself, and said, word by word, actually, I came to find you because I want you to be my assistant for a while. A male assistant? Are you and Preston married? The words tumbled out of my mouth. As soon as I said it, I felt like an idiot. Of course they were married. All this time had passed, and a woman like her. It was the logical conclusion. But the way she had taken my hand at the airport a month ago, the easy intimacy of our dinner, it made me unconsciously assume she was still single. A ridiculous thought popped into my head. If I had been a little more forward this past month, would I have already cheated with Preston's wife? I violently shoved the thought away. I gathered myself and refused without a second's hesitation. No, forget how uncomfortable it would be for me to work as an assistant for a married woman. I'd be miserable, and Preston would probably lose his mind. And if I actually became the other man, the one breaking up a family, my parents would kill me. If anyone from back home found out, the gossip alone would be enough to drown me. A complex emotion flickered in Samantha's eyes. She grabbed my hand, her voice turning pleading and sweet. Please, stop. I yanked my hand back, a shiver running up my spine. I knew exactly what she was doing. This was her signature move, the one I could never resist when we were dating. I remembered one New Year's Eve. She texted me in the middle of the night, saying her parents were out of town and she was lonely. With a barrage of pleases and I'm begging yous, she convinced me to take a 16-hour Greyhound bus to spend the holiday with her because all the flights were booked. But this was different. She was Preston's wife now. I might joke online about wanting to steal another man's girl, but when faced with the real, immoral thing, I couldn't do it. Samantha seemed stunned by how firm I was. After a few seconds, a flash of frustration crossed her face. If you agree to help me, I can give you a portion of the company's shares. She leaned closer, her voice soft, almost a humble plea. You know, everyone around me has their own agenda. Most of the time, I can't tell who's on my side. But I trust you. Forget it. I leaned back, creating some distance between us, my tone firm. My family's business might not be on the same level as yours, but we do okay. With that, I pulled a bank card from my wallet and held it out to her. This is money I earned overseas. There's about $150,000 in there, I said. If Preston ever turns out to be the snake you think he is, trying to take everything from you, use this to tide you over. The pin is your birthday. Back when we were dating, Samantha never lorded her wealth over me. In fact, she was always finding excuses to spend money on me. She knew I liked tech, so she bought me the latest laptop. When Preston made a snide comment about my cheap Nike tracksuits, she bought me a designer jacket. My pride made me try to buy her equally expensive gifts at first, but she would always one-up me with something even more extravagant. Eventually, I just learned to accept it. Now that she had come to me, and I had the means, I didn't want to be in her debt. Samantha just stared at the card in my hand, her expression unreadable. She didn't take it. I didn't give her a chance to hesitate. I shoved the card into the pocket of her coat, turned, and ran toward the street, leaving her calling my name as the sound faded behind me. I thought that would be the end of it. But the next morning, Preston Vance was waiting for me outside my dad's company. "Cole, we need to talk." His face was dark enough to drip poison and tinged with a sickly pallor. I rubbed my throbbing temples, completely exasperated. We found a nearby coffee shop. I cut straight to the chase. "What do you want?" "Samantha and I are married," Preston said, his eyes burning into me, as if declaring his sovereignty. "Yes, so." I took a sip of water, my tone dismissive. "You want a trophy or something?" "Cole, I want you to stay away from Samantha. She is my wife," he hissed. "You abandoned her when she needed you most. It was me. I gave her my kidney. You have no right to even be near her." Preston's voice rose, his sudden shout drawing glances from the next table. The smirk on my face vanished, my expression turning cold. "Are you implying that I'm trying to seduce your wife? Before you start spewing garbage, maybe you should come up with some evidence. I've done you a favor by not sleeping with her, and you have the nerve to come at me?" You're crude," Preston stammered, his face flushing red. Just then, the coffee shop door was thrown open, and Samantha rushed in, breathless. "Preston, what are you doing here with Cole?" She came straight to my side, her protective stance obvious, as she glared at him. "Samantha, I'm your husband." Preston was losing control, slamming his hands on the table as he shot to his feet. I looked at the two of them, poised for battle, and my headache intensified. "You two talk. I'm leaving." I got up to go, wanting no part in their marital drama. The fact that Preston had donated his kidney to Samantha was a surprise, though. The man really was a simp, or deeply devoted. And were kidney matches really this easy to come by in this world? Samantha tried to say something, but Preston stopped her. "Cole, don't go yet. We're not finished." Samantha had no choice but to block Preston's path. That night, Samantha sent me a text apologizing. I just replied, "It's fine." After that, neither of them contacted me again. A year passed, slow and steady. I got used to the rhythm of the company. Finally, I couldn't fight my mom off any longer and started going on blind dates. It wasn't exactly a smooth process. I didn't run into any of the online horror stories, the girls with insane demands, or the ones who treat you like an ATM, but every date still ended in failure. Most of the time, it was my fault. I'm shallow. Looks matter to me. I met a few women, but there was no spark. And in today's dating world, the woman expects the man to make all the moves. If you don't, things just fizzle out. But it makes sense. A truly beautiful woman has guys lining up for her. She doesn't need to go on blind dates. I finally met one who was cute, someone I could actually see myself with. But it turned out she was what you'd call a professional ex-girlfriend of a rich guy. "My ex was so good to me," she'd say. "He bought me designer bags that cost thousands. We only stayed in 5-star hotels when we traveled. My ex's family owns a publicly traded company." At first, I listened patiently, telling myself I couldn't just get up and walk out. My mom would never let me hear the end of it. Then she started picking me apart, putting aside everything else. For a bombshell from a wealthy family like Samantha to fall for me in college, I had to be decent looking. And my family situation wasn't bad either. Yet here was this unemployed woman, whose parents were just working class, critiquing me. I felt like the matchmaker had either lost her mind or been paid off to set me up with this disaster. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I just asked her, "So why'd he dump you? Did he wear you out?" The result was predictable. A full cup of coffee thrown in my face. "Cole, Preston's dead." It was Samantha's voice on the other end of the line, raw and hoarse. What? Another 6 months had passed. When I got the call, my mind went completely blank. "How?" "Kidney failure. He passed away a week ago." Samantha's voice was devoid of emotion. "I'm home alone. I'm scared. Can you come over?" I held the phone, hesitating for 3 long seconds, but my heart softened. Not many men, especially single men, can refuse a cry for help from their first love. And now that she was truly alone in the world, I couldn't seem to find a reason to say no. Samantha's penthouse was luxurious. I'd only ever seen it from the outside. Walking in, I was struck by a chilling emptiness, a sense that no one really lived here. When I saw Samantha, she was wearing a simple black dress, the quintessential widow's weeds. The tailored fabric clung to her figure, and I couldn't help but let my eyes linger for a moment too long. Come in, she said, stepping aside. Her face wasn't etched with the grief I expected. Instead, she was eerily calm. She took a bottle of red wine from the bar, poured 2 glasses, and pushed one toward me. Cole, I'm planning on leaving the country. I took a sip of wine, the rich liquid unable to quell the shock in my gut. What about your company? I sold it to Preston's parents. As compensation for their loss. She swirled the wine in her glass, her lips stained as red as blood. Hearing that she was leaving for good, a sudden hollowness opened up inside me. A strange, panic feeling. Humans are weird creatures. When you know you can see someone whenever you want, you wish they'd stay away. But the moment they're really about to leave, you can't bear it. Fucking pathetic. Samantha clearly noticed my reaction. She leaned in a little closer, her tone teasing. Going to miss me? I opened my mouth, wanted to say a cool no, but the word got stuck in my throat. Just then, a powerful wave of dizziness washed over me. The image of Samantha in front of me blurred. The wine glass slipped from my hand, landing with a dull thud on the plush carpet. I tried to grab the edge of the table to steady myself, but my strength failed me. My vision went black, and I lost consciousness completely. When I woke up, my head was splitting. I was in a soft, massive bed. Sunlight streamed through a gap in the curtains, and Samantha was curled up in my arms, her dark hair splayed across my chest. After I woke her, her explanation sent a surge of fury through me. What do you mean? You were scared of being alone abroad and wanted me to give you a child. She just snuggled closer, completely unbothered like a clingy cat. Well, what's done is done. If you can live with it, go ahead and call the cops. I looked at the faint scar on her chest, a remnant of her long-ago surgery, and felt a sense of resignation wash over me. Stay, I said. 3 years later, because Samantha wanted nothing more to do with her relatives, we had a small wedding in a chapel overseas. The only ones there were my parents and our 1-year-old daughter, Chloe. Another decade flew by. In those 10 years, Samantha and I found some of that sticky, sweet love we'd had back in college. I rarely let myself wonder if she truly didn't mind that I had abandoned her all those years ago. With Samantha's capital, I grew my family's company into a major enterprise. Life seemed to be moving in the right direction. But fate has a twisted sense of humor. With only 1 kidney, and her body weakened by childbirth, she collapsed suddenly in her 38th year. The doctors told me it was terminal. Give her my kidney. This time I didn't run. But when Samantha was lucid, she gripped my hand with surprising strength. Don't, she whispered. Just raise Chloe well. Maybe I'm not someone who puts love above all else. For the first year after Samantha died, I was lost in a deep depression. But in the 3rd year, a young, beautiful secretary started working for me. Chloe and I had a massive fight over it. Our relationship grew distant after that. She lived in a dorm at her boarding school and spent holidays with her grandparents. I was busy with the business. The few times we saw each other, our conversations were limited to polite, hollow greetings. Time passed. On Chloe's 30th birthday, the day she got married, I handed her a file. Inside were the documents for all the assets Samantha had left behind. The money was enough to make her forgive me. Epilogue. Samantha's story in the moment before the crash. All I remember is my mother pulling me into a fierce embrace. Then came the violent impact and the screech of tearing metal. When I opened my eyes again, the harsh white light of the hospital room stung. I could hear nurses whispering nearby. Her parents didn't make it. The girl's not looking good either. In that instant, my world collapsed. I wanted to rip the 4 from my arm, to go and be with them, but I couldn't move. The physical pain was nothing compared to the gaping void in my chest. I was a marionette with its strings cut, unable to even cry, just lying there as my consciousness drifted in and out. It was Cole's voice that pulled me back from the brink. He was slumped by my bedside, calling my name over and over. I couldn't speak, but his voice was my only lifeline in that chaos. He stayed with me for a month. He cleaned me, changed my soiled bedsheets. I was aware of it all. As my moments of lucidity grew longer, I overheard the doctor talking to him. Both kidneys are damaged. She needs a transplant as soon as possible. You're a match. We need to prepare for surgery. My heart seized. How could I take his kidney? He was so young, with so much ahead of him. I would rather die than ruin his life. But then, he ran away. Was I angry with him? Of course. Not because he wouldn't donate his kidney, but because he didn't even say goodbye. If he had just told me, I'm scared, I would have forgiven him. All I wanted was for him to be with me until the end. But hate him? I couldn't. I survived. It was Preston who gave me his kidney. When the doctor announced the surgery was a success, I didn't feel the joy I expected. Only a vast, empty numbness. I had been ready to join my parents, but instead, I was forced to live on a patched-together thing kept alive by someone else's organ. It felt worse than death. So Preston's self-righteous sacrifice? I felt a flicker of gratitude, but not much more. But having walked to the gates of hell and back, I no longer had the courage to take my own life. If I was going to live, I had to find out if my parents' death was really an accident. And those vultures at the company were still circling. I couldn't let myself fall. After I was discharged, Preston's parents came to see me, their faces plastered with fake smiles. "Samantha, dear," his mother began, "when Preston said he wanted to give you his kidney, his father and I were completely against it. But he's a stubborn boy. We couldn't do a thing to stop him. You can't let him down now, can you?" Their words were a dull knife, twisting in my heart. Finally, they made their proposition: marry Preston. Fine, I'll marry him. As I said those 3 words, I felt my soul leave my body. Married life was even colder than I had imagined. On our wedding night, I moved into the guest room and locked the door, leaving Preston outside. It wasn't to be cruel. I truly couldn't bring myself to be close to him. Every time I looked at his earnest, plain face, I would think how much better it would be if I had married Cole. Compared to Preston, Cole always knew the right things to say, the sweet words that made my heart flutter. More importantly, I despised this coerced marriage, resented how he used my life and my company's survival to chain me to him. Preston didn't force the issue. He just came home for dinner every night, made sure the kitchen cooked my favorite dishes. He was like a live-in butler, but who falls in love with their butler? Eventually, I consolidated my power at the company, rooting out the parasites one by one. I investigated my parents' accident and found out the truth. It really was just an accident. The night I took full control of the company, I slept soundly for the first time in years. I had a strange, vivid dream. In the dream, things were both the same and terribly different. Cole had only stayed by my bedside for a week before leaving for Europe. I waited in that empty hospital room for weeks until Preston returned from his own studies abroad. The rest played out much like reality. I married him and took over the company. But 4 years later, when Cole came back, he was the one who called me first. "Samantha, I'm back," he'd said, his voice thick with tears over the phone. "My parents forced me to leave. I'm so sorry." My heart melted instantly. I picked him up from the airport. He was in a sharp suit. His eyes read the moment he saw me. He clutched my hands, apologizing over and over, promising to make up for the lost years. I collapsed into his arms and cried. After that day, we rekindled our old flame. I even let him become my assistant at the company, and we spent every day together. But that's when Preston's health started to decline. Every few days, he'd tell me he wasn't feeling well. But every time he called and asked me to go with him to the doctor, Cole would find some excuse to keep me by his side. Gradually, Preston stopped calling me. Sometimes I find myself craving the sweet and sour ribs he used to make, but the thought would always be drowned out by Cole's sweet nothings. By the time I found out I was pregnant with Cole's child and decided to divorce Preston, I got a call from the hospital. Preston was dying of kidney failure. In that moment, my mind went blank. When I rushed to the hospital, he was lying in bed, so thin he was almost unrecognizable. He saw me come in and just quietly closed his eyes. I took his cold hand, and the tears just started to fall. I had loved him all along, and I was only just realizing it now. I started spending all my time at his bedside, learning to make the seafood risotto he loved. But I was wrong. He was allergic to shellfish. The one who loved seafood risotto was Cole. When Cole showed up at the hospital, he pointed at the man in the bed and called him a burden. Without thinking, I slapped him across the face. That's when he told Preston I was carrying his child. To spare Preston the pain, I made the heartbreaking decision to have an abortion. The hospital was searching for a donor, but there were no matches. Watching Preston's vitals fade, I told the doctor with red-rimmed eyes, "Give him my kidney back." He gave it to me. Now I'm giving it back. But the test results showed that my own kidney had irreversible damage. It couldn't be transplanted. In my despair, my assistant ran in, panicked, telling me Cole had sold company secrets. We were on the verge of bankruptcy. The blood in my veins turned to ice, replaced by a towering, monstrous rage. I had people drag Cole to a private clinic. As they were removing his kidney, I raced to the hospital with it, only to see the nurses removing Preston's ventilator. His eyes were closed. "Preston." I collapsed onto his bed, my tears splashing onto his cold face. "The kidney is here, look." He would never answer me again. My heart, broken by grief and rage, gave out. I followed him into the darkness. Ugh! A violent feeling of suffocation jolted me awake. Cold sweat trickled down my temple, the pillow damp and cold beneath my head. It was just a nightmare. I gasped for air, my heart still pounding wildly. I heard a faint noise downstairs. I threw on a robe and went down to find Preston in the kitchen, wearing an apron, the rich aroma of sweet and sour ribs stewing on the stove. He heard me and turned, his eyes holding their usual gentle warmth. "Samantha, breakfast is almost ready." Seeing him standing there, whole and real, the blood and despair of the dream still swirled in my mind. A thought suddenly took root. Let it be. Perhaps the dream was too real. Perhaps it was guilt. Even though the sudden realization in my dream that I loved Preston felt bizarre, when his parents came over yet again with supplements and pressure to have a child, I didn't refuse. That night, I told him, "You can come in my room tonight." Preston's eyes lit up like a child who'd just been given candy. But the joy didn't last. After a few clumsy, failed attempts, he finally looked away, his face a mask of shame. "Samantha, I'm sorry." "It's okay." I turned away to hide the complicated look in my own eyes. "If it doesn't work, we can try IVF." "Wait, just give me some time," he pleaded, clutching my hand, his face flushed. But over the next few months, no matter what he tried, the result was the same. The guilt I felt for him because of that dream slowly faded, replaced by a growing revulsion every time his fumbling left me feeling messy and disgusted. I started finding more and more excuses to avoid him. Preston, in turn, became increasingly paranoid. He saw every man I spoke to as a potential rival. We fought more and more, the atmosphere in our home growing colder than a tomb. Worn down by his suffocating jealousy, I started looking up news about Cole, reminiscing about the good times we once had. When I found out he was coming back, I went to the airport to meet him. The dream, where he was the one desperately chasing me, was still vivid in my mind. But in reality, he made no move at all. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore and drove to his family's company. His tone was distant and polite, a world away from the man in my dream who had cried and begged for me back. I laughed at myself. Maybe it really was just a dream, not a prophecy. His courteous withdrawal was sincere, without a hint of flirtation. A strange sense of relief washed over me. The man I had loved for so long might not have been the most passionate, but he was certainly not the venomous monster from my nightmare. I never contacted Cole again after that. But Preston's health, just like in the dream, began to fail. When the diagnosis of kidney failure came, I was unervingly calm. His parents stormed into my home and screamed at me, calling me a curse. I didn't argue. I signed the papers, selling them my shares and the company. A final payment on my debt to their family. At Preston's funeral, his parents showed little grief. I'd already heard they were quietly arranging for a surrogate. I stood before his gravestone, brushing a fallen leaf from the cold marble. "Preston," I whispered, "in your next life, don't be such a simp. Find someone who truly loves you." After Preston died, the penthouse was cavernously empty. I sat for hours, staring at my parents' portraits, and an idea began to form. A gamble. I was Cole's child, a descendant for the Hayes family. After everything I had been through, any lingering resentment I had for Cole was gone. As a woman alone with a massive fortune, he was my best option, both for my own safety and to satisfy the lingering emotional attachment I still had for him. In the world of adults, suitability is far more important than love. I used a few tricks, played the victim. Whether it was out of guilt or because he still loved me, it didn't matter. He took me back, and in our marriage, he was devoted to me. There were no fights, no affairs with other women. Cole, thank you. Through all the storms, I found my peace. I have no regrets.